Welcome back to the Scoliosis Dialogues, the official podcast of the Scoliosis Research Society. I'm Grant Hogue from Boston Children's Hospital, and I'll be hosting this episode. Our guest today is Dr. Jim Sanders, and he'll be discussing his new paper in spine deformity titled Activity Capacity in Children with Early Onset Scoliosis Compared to Pulmonary Function and Reported Outcomes. Jim is well known within the SRS in the world of pediatric spine surgery. He's won every named research award that the SRS, POSNA, and ICHIOS have to offer. We are all incredibly grateful for your research efforts. And every time I look at a bone age x-ray, I'm thankful that I don't have to get out a Greilich-Compile atlas because of your work with the Sanders classification system. So thank you so much, Jim, for being on today.
Grant, thank you. This is fun work, and we've got so much to learn, and it's really nice to be able to keep this stuff going forward.
So, Jim, would you mind giving us kind of a 2 to 3 minute summary of your paper? And also, for those who may not know, telling us what is a MET?
Okay, that sounds good. So actually, I'm going to start out giving credit to Greg Redding, who Greg deserves credit for many of the things that we do with early onset scoliosis, and was having a conversation with several members of the ICEOS and with Greg. And we began talking about pulmonary function because it's so hard to measure in little kids. And Greg came back to a very simple concept, and I call this sort of the Redding hypotheses, is that if kids can't breathe well, three things can happen. They don't sleep, they don't grow, and they don't play. And so as you start thinking about it, we have some tools for the sleep, we have some tools for the grow, but we really don't have good tools for the play. And for adults, that would become work. So when I came here to UNC, they have a very strong group doing exercise and sports medicine. So I went to go talk with them about how to do that. And they came up with really trying to measure the metabolic equivalence of task or METs. And METs is if you are just sitting, laying around, just breathing, your body has to consume a certain amount of energy. And you can do that by oxygen consumption. And that amount of energy is your basal metabolic rate. But when you do anything, that basal metabolic rate increases. So if you're sitting reading a book, it will increase a little bit. If you're playing with toys, it will increase. Video games will increase it. If you go play a soccer match, it's going to increase it markedly, or run a marathon. And you can measure those in the ratio of the energy consumption of the activity to the basal metabolic rate, and that is the MET. So if it's 1.2 times your basal metabolic rate, that would be what your MET is. If it's 5 times, it would be 5. If it's 10 times, like swimming fast 200 meters, it's going to go up to over 10 as you're doing it. So you can measure these things, and each activity has a specific MET which is associated with it. And it's been tested in normal kids and in adults. So the concept with this was to identify, do METs correlate with the ability of kids to play? And can we then use that as a measure of pulmonary function in a functional way in children with early onset scoliosis? So that's what we did. We enrolled kids with it. The kids that we had were very severely restricted. We ended up, as we started filtering it, because we dropped off all the kids with BiPAP that night. So as you begin filtering it, we went down from 22 pretty good candidates to 8. And as we did that, it ended up that 5 had very severe respiratory restriction with the FEV1 FVC of less than 50%. And what we found is that what we thought was going to happen is that as kids would do activities, that their METs would increase more than other kids because it would take them more energy. It was more difficult to do. They'd have to breathe harder. And what it seems really happened is that as kids got more vigorous activities, they just kind of died off on doing the activity. So you could give a very vigorous video game to them, and they would go within the limits, and they just kind of pause and they'd keep doing it. You'd ask them to box hard, and they would box semi-hard. And then when they got tired, they'd box light. So that's really sort of one of the fundamental things that we found from this. The pulmonary functions were kind of all over the place, and it's hard to know what to really make with that. But I think we found a fundamental behavior that is probably happening with children with pulmonary restriction from early onset scoliosis.
It's absolutely incredible. And the way you describe it makes it seem like something that we should have known all along if we were just observing people maybe in home. But we only see these kids for tiny little snippets in the office. And when we talk to a family or a patient about their activity level, they say, "Oh yeah, well he plays, soccer with his friends twice a week." And the picture that we have in our mind about playing soccer twice a week is probably very different than what it looks like for them to play soccer twice a week.
Exactly. So instead of running up and down the field really vigorously, they may just sort of be sitting around, going a little bit with the beehive that's out there in little kids and kicking the ball from time to time. And still fun, still good for them, but just not the same level that we tend to think of.
And so when I'm asking someone about their activity level, based on what you're finding here, how should I interpret what they say and what should my next question be?
I think it's good to ask the kids what they perceive as their activity because the kids are going to come up with, oh, I am fast. I can do all sorts of things. And particularly the boys, we found out, tended to do more of that than the girls did. The girls may have been a little bit more realistic, but actually the parents tend to be quite realistic. And that's what we found when we were looking at some of the promise scores is that the parents, the proxy score of the parents correlated with these much more than anything that the kids would say.
So you've brought up promise, and you evaluated promise and EOSQ 24 alongside, the indirect calorimetry. And so why do you think that the parent and patient reported outcomes often fail to capture the functional met limitations? And is there a place for us to start thinking about adapting our questionnaires to better catch self-limiting behaviors?
I really like the question. I think when you go look at the OSQ, it doesn't really measure activity in the same way that we're looking at activity. How much does a child do? How vigorously can they do things? And Greg Rating points out that it deals more with some of the basic ventilation aspects rather than the true function that kids are having on the pulmonary tests. The parent proxy actually did fairly well when you're doing the physical function component of it, but the kids did not. It's all over the place. I think that is my suspicion is that as we begin developing better outcome instruments to really look at, I'll call them sort of the reading domains of sleep, growth, and play is that we're going to need to have more specific questions, and the parent proxy is probably going to give us better answers than what the kids say that they can do.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think that potentially even makes sense for us as surgeons. We have an idea about our abilities or our skill level in the OR, but if someone were watching us, they would know how often we changed a plan intraoperatively.
Of course, we're all above average.
Exactly. And so just a little bit of a shift. I'd like to talk to you about wearables in the future and how we might be able to incorporate wearables almost like a Holter monitor approach to get some of this same data. If you could just talk about any experience or any ideas you have for that in the future, as something that we could have alongside our patient or parent reported outcomes.
I really like the direction with that because we're going to have a hard time identifying kids' activity levels just by asking them questions. I think the parents are a little bit closer, but the closer you can get to the kids' actual activity is going to be with something that's actually recording that. If you look at the phones now, they have accelerometers, they can do all sorts of other things. How many steps did you take during the day? It pops up on all of these. So it hasn't been done, to my knowledge, in a large degree in kids with early onset scoliosis. I would love to see that done. I would love to correlate it with the Mets and see what's happening. I think we have a lot of work to do on that, but it could sure be fun trying to figure this out.
Put it out there, Jim. That sounds like a really good idea for a future SRS funded project.
I like that. I like that a lot.
And so, lastly, on this paper, Um, how has this changed your own practice, not just in the clinic, but potentially even in surgical decision making?
Yeah, and again, I'm going to kind of come back to Greg, and then it's as he would look at the pulmonary function testing, which really only measures the lung volumes, the expiration, et cetera. It's not really measuring the functional capacity. It's it would be our kids declining in this. Do we need to do something differently? I still have a lot of skepticism that our growing instrumentation really massively improves anything other than spinal alignment over time. And so that's another component of it. What are we doing? Are we trying to expand the lungs? Are we making them stiffer and making it harder for kids to breathe over time? And I don't have good answers for those yet, Greg.
I think that's a really good point. I have one young man that I see who has a 90-degree curve, kind of mixed congenital and myelomeningocele, who has never had surgery, and he is an incredible wheelchair basketball player at a high level. And his response to me was, "You cannot do anything to me that will take me out of wheelchair basketball. So, no, sir, I do not want your surgery."
Yeah, I've had some kids with horrible congenital scoliosis who are functioning just fine. And I think we just don't truly understand all of the components that go into this yet.
I think you're absolutely right. Dr. Sanders, thank you so much for being on the Scoliosis Dialogues today. We acknowledge your work and that of your research team and your partners, which are featured on this important project, who we hope to see you soon and read more of your work in the future.
And thank you. Appreciate you doing all of this.
All right, have a great day.
Bye bye.